The burrow was Mother and Father's dream home. A place where everybody could stay warm and safe. Aunt Bettelina knew more about wilderness survival than she ever got to teach me. It didn't last. The wilderness seemed to worry my parents. The promise of the sprawling city didn't disappoint at first. The only jobs were in the mines, and they were hard on my parents. They almost earned enough for the tickets back home before they passed. I sold everything, packed my bag, and left for my true home. The old burrow, now barely recognizable. Why hasn't Aunt Bettelina kept it in shape? Hello, hello. It's a frigid memento. And while my YouTube focuses on the spooky and the cozy, I actually have a huge secret. I love survival crafting games. When I'm not recording or streaming, I love diving into games like Don't Starve Together, The Forest, Sons of the Forest, Raft, and most recently, Green Hell. So seeing a game like Winter Burrow, that's a survival crafting game with a more cozy atmosphere, I was really intrigued. Usually I stick to co-op because of my inability to fight bosses by myself. Thanks, Nine. But this seemed like the perfect foray into single-player survival crafting. It was lower stakes than usual, there don't appear to be any bosses, and I still have to manage my resources. With that being said, I really fell in love with Winter Burrow, and I'm going to give you all of the reasons why. So the first thing I want to touch on is the story, which you heard at the very beginning of this video. I thought the story was simple, sweet, and even a little bit sad. It set up the plot to make sense, and I understood why this little mouse wanted to return back to the burrow without just info dumping everything all at once. It sets the scene and allows the story to develop in a way that feels natural. Once you're at the burrow, the first order of business is just fixing things up. You need to fix up each of your crafting stations, as well as make yourself a place to sleep. This is all simple enough to do just by foraging around the area for sticks, stones, logs, and even food. There are a few enemies you can choose to fight, but they aren't aggressive, so if you want to leave them alone and just eat mushrooms, that's absolutely fine too. One thing I highly recommend is make sure you collect all of that brown fur that you see around your base. You're going to need it later, and I neglected to collect much of it, and that set me back quite a bit. Once your home is fixed up, the game sends you to look for your auntie, who remained in the area. This small section of game was probably my least favorite, as it has you going back and talking to her repeatedly for a quest line, and I felt that it did diminish some of the flow of the story because you would have to go across the bridge and then go back, across the bridge and then go back each and every time, and I would even sleep in between them just to make sure that I wasn't going over there for no reason. And it felt a little bit like a slog, but the good news is this is the only place where you have to do anything like that, so I don't know, for it to only happen once, I'm not really gonna come down on it too hard. Now, of course, for this section, if you hadn't done each part of her quest ahead of time, this actually wouldn't have been an issue, but I got a little carried away with the gathering and repairing, so by the time I talked to my auntie, I was more than ready to move on to what lies beyond the bridge. And like I said, the good news is this was my only real pacing issue, and the rest of it I found genuinely enjoyable. Many of the quests have you going back and forth, and while some might find it tedious, I found it to be very relaxing given the scope of the game. I enjoyed gathering the different materials, and none of the treks felt so long that I felt as though I was wasting my time. Each one of the NPCs that you're going to talk to is relatively close to you, so you're really not doing so much backtracking. And overall, I just found the story so charming, and I really enjoyed watching it unfold. Along with the story, though, are all of the quirky characters within it. Winter Burrow is host to many a quirky animal, and all of them have problems that you can help solve along the way. I found the characters to all be endearing in their own ways. Each of them had a fully fleshed out story and quest line that you could complete for an achievement. And as of writing this, I finished the quest lines for all but one of them. But when I first wrote this, I had just finished Gnawtusk and Bufo, and both of them had stories that I really loved. I don't want to spoil anything, but I found that both of them had some sadness to them, but also a lot of hope within their tales. And it made me really enjoy getting to know each of these characters, and I felt compelled to do their quests not just to progress the story, but because they were genuinely likable. In fact, you actually don't have to complete the quests to progress the story. You have to do some of them, but you don't have to do all of them, and it was nice. I wanted to go back and do it, and I think you guys will too. These quests are also set up really well. Some of them are going to have you exploring the world and help open up new paths, while others compel you to do more than just the basic crafting. I personally thought I wouldn't bother making any pies because most of the cooking recipes I didn't really need to worry too much about, but Bufo needed pies and I wasn't about to deny them their pies. So really the quest system itself is set up really well, and I like how it made me do things that I wasn't necessarily going to do, so it opened up more possibilities for me. Now, let's dive into the beefy section, the mechanics. Unlike many of the cozy games I've covered, I think there are less mechanics within Winter Burrow. However, it's the quality that's the most important, not necessarily the quantity. So I'm going to break down each mechanic in the game and how I think it's handled. Health bars! Alright, there are 4 bars on the bottom left of your screen, and they denote your health, hunger, warmth, and stamina. Hunger and warmth deplete over time, but can be filled with food or drinks, or for warmth, going inside. You lose health when fighting or when the hunger/warmth bar reaches 0, and stamina is only consumed when running or using a tool and refills over time. I think that the bars are simple, but they make a lot of sense. I mean, there's nothing I would really change about them. I think it would be cool if you could get a stamina upgrade at some point, but other than that, no notes. Crafting! Crafting can be done at either the workbench or the armchair. You can make planks, tools, furniture at the workbench, and clothes, yarns, and more furniture at the armchair. I think this is a really simple but effective system. Materials you collect and then refine at one of those stations and use to make additional things or higher quality tools. You can also craft one or craft all to allow for easy refining. So if you go out and you do like I do and you collect a whole bunch of wood, you can refine all of it at once and you don't have to sit and do it every single one at a time. Of course, there are times when that's valid too, because you will need raw materials for some of your crafting. This is just important to make sure you note when you need what. Cooking! There are 4 categories within the cooking menu, and pies are the most difficult to make. Recipes sometimes require you to make one thing and use that first recipe to make something else, and these 2-step recipes are often more nutritious or needed for quests. And a lot of the food also gave you some sort of buff. So the simple foods like the skewers, they just fill your hunger. However, more complicated foods can give you hunger and refill some of your warmth. And the highest tier of food, the pies, can also buff your stamina in different ways too. And I did find some of these slightly lower tier foods did this as well. I feel like the cooking system is pretty intuitive, pretty simple, and overall, I like how it's laid out. It didn't feel overly tedious. There's no like little mini game or anything. You just get there and get it done. And for someone who frequently dislikes how cooking is done in these cozy games, that's a win for me. When I don't have to mess with it, I like it. Gardening! So, in your basement, you unlock an area where you can grow mushrooms, and this is something that you're meant to live off early game. Now, my problem with this is by the time you unlock the basement, I feel like you're already making things that aren't just mushrooms. It really felt like the basement was more for aesthetic purposes and less for actually trying to grow mushrooms to sustain yourself. So that was kind of a shame to me that it was underutilized. It also takes a really long time to grow the mushrooms, or maybe I'm just really garbage at remembering to water them. Later in the game, your auntie can also grow herbs for you in planter boxes, and these can be used for some of the more advanced recipes, and I've just been hoarding materials for that. I'm gonna be so real. I have not crafted nearly enough. Combat! You can fight back against hostile bugs using either your axe or your pickaxe. It's a simple but effective combat system. You're going to use up stamina, so you do need to watch it. And as you upgrade your tools, you actually hit harder, which I did think was a nice touch because I feel like they could have just kept that the same. Late game enemies get really hard, but at no point did the combat feel super challenging. But looking at the scope of this game, it made sense. It didn't seem like this game was trying to be overly difficult, but did provide you a little bit of challenge and does give you some warning. Let me tell you, the spiders do not play. And finally, woodcutting / mining. So, I was talking about the tools in the combat section, and as you progress, you level up your tools, allowing you to mine new rocks or cut down larger vines. And this allows for a progression system that slowly expands the area that you can explore. And the one thing that I especially like about this is that the area, you're in the center, and the areas expand out in each direction. So, it doesn't feel like you're here and you have to travel further. It's more like you're here and you can go here, but as time goes on, you can go here and here and here, and then eventually you can go back to that first area you were in and you can travel down a little bit further. And I thought that this was a really good and natural progression system, and it was all tied to your axe and your pickaxe. And there it is! Smaller than usual in my opinion, but what Winter Burrow lacks in quantity of mechanics, I feel like it makes up for in quality. I felt that all the mechanics made sense, and aside from gardening, there was a really natural progression to each one of them. By upgrading your tools, you had reasons to go back to areas you had explored already, since new areas could be opened up. The food also allowed you to do more and be out in the snow for longer without freezing, and each system just felt very intentional, and I was very pleased with how clean the mechanics were. Finally, the music. All throughout this video, you've been listening to the soundtrack of the game, and I invite you, as always, to draw your own conclusions. For me personally, though, I love the soundtrack. I think the music fit perfectly with the world, and I was immersed listening to it. My favorite track is probably the one when you first open the game, as there's just something that really drew me in with it. But all the music was lovely, and I definitely will be listening to this soundtrack when I need some background music of my own. And spoiler alert, I actually have been using it at work as some of my relaxation music. I'm not kidding, I really love the soundtrack to this game. So, what are my final thoughts? As someone who loves the survival crafting genre, I can safely say that Winter Burrow is absolutely amazing. It's a cozy experience that isn't meant to be overly stressful, but still has those elements of risk at play. I still needed to monitor my health, my warmth, and my hunger, and there were definitely a few times I almost made a grave misstep just from getting caught off guard. If you're looking for a way to ease into some solo survival crafting, Winter Burrow is a perfect start. This game eases you in, but also provides risks to remind you that the wilderness isn't safe for a little mouse. Winter Burrow is a game that I feel compelled to go back to, and I want to see how the full story plays out. I'm excited to find out what the future holds for our little mouse, and I promise that once I get there, I'll be decorating and turning my little burrow into a true home. Because, as of right now, I've been really bad about decorating, but that's okay. And as of this review, I recorded for the review about 3 hours of footage, and I have now played it for about 6 hours, just on my own, of my own volition, and I can safely say that I really, really love this game. And if you decide to pick it up, I want to know what you think. So, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, leave a nice little comment, or maybe even subscribe so that you can know every time I upload a new video. And with that being said, stay toasty warm. Ready, steady, bye!